Hello everyone, as carpenters we have a massive array of tools at our disposal, many of which we use now, certainly on site, are power tools, but we also have a great deal of hand tools. And of those hand tools, there's lots of tools that we use for marking out, being levels and gauges and things like that. But it does come sometimes to the point where we need to make our own gadget or marking aid or something to help us hold something or prop something up. In this video I'm going to show you all of the little bits and bobs that I've knocked up on site. None of them are particularly pretty to look at because they're pretty much all made of scraps of wood. So I've gone through the van and I've basically gathered up all of the various bits and bobs that I've made throughout the years that have been in various bags and boxes and belts. I've put them all on the bench and put some numbers on them. And what I'm going to do is show you them all first, maybe give you a few moments to have a think about what they are, maybe you can make a guess just for fun, and then I'll talk through what they actually are and what I use them for. So I've lined them all up on the bench, let's have a look. So here's the first one, it's just a piece of, I think this was 3x2, it's got a slight angle cut on the end and it's got a couple of screws which go down. So that's got a very distinct function that helps me. Next one, this is a two-parter. So this is number 2. This is an attachment that goes on my table saw and helps me make some items that are very useful. Now this one, number 3, is a dual purpose. So this is number 3 and it's number 4. So again, a very useful little bit of kit that I have had for quite a long time. When I lose one, I just make another one. Number 5 is, I've done a video on this one, you may or may not have seen it. Fantastically useful little bit of kit, just made up of some old bits of MDF skirting and I think an old stair riser. On to number 6, these are both the same. These are a very helpful setting out tool. You may or may not be able to guess what they are. And then on to number 7. Again, I've done a video on this one. This is just made out, again, I think of a stair riser, birch face ply. Got a hole in the middle and a couple of smaller holes on either side of that. And then some rubber on the back. And then moving on to number 8 and number 9. These are both the same. Again, very, very handy bits of kit. Made these out of some offcuts of some European white oak. So let's go back up to the front and I'll tell you what I do with them. Right, so number 1, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll leave number 1 till the end because number 1 actually attaches to some other things that I've made that are possibly the most important bits of kit that you make out of wood as a carpenter. Right, so number 2, basically this is a wedge cutting jig that I put on my table saw, and what it does is creates these lovely little wedges, usually sort of folding wedges that I use when I'm fitting door linings to space them in and out. I'll put that on the saw and I'll just show you how that works. So pretty simply here, I've got my table saw, and again this is, I think everything's pretty much made out of an old stair riser. That's just a piece of 9mm ply that I put a couple little battens on each side, and what that basically does is it clips perfectly over the table of my saw. So what I do is basically line this up with the blade, just bring the blade up a little bit more, line up the blade, and then that locates nice and tight onto the table of the saw, and then I bring the saw blade up until, the saw's not plugged in by the way, I bring the saw blade up until it fits perfectly into that groove there. And that's aligned front and rear. Then I just bring the fence across. Just line up a little better than that. Lovely. And then basically what you do is, I haven't got any softwood to show you, but what I normally do, this is sort of, these are made out of 18mm pine, like a pine deal, softwood timber, and what I normally do, here's what I'll show you. I haven't got a piece, but normally what I'd have is a piece of maybe 8 or 9x1, and I would cut it into 100mm strips, and then it's a simple case of you'd put the put this part of the jig in here, and then you drop the 100mm wide bit of 9x1 or whatever, you stick that into there, turn the saw on, and you just, as you pass it through, it cuts off a lovely wedge like that. So absolutely perfect. You just cut one off, turn it around, and basically the wedges, you have to be very careful here obviously, the wedges just pop out the back. So yeah, again, I do this without the guard on the top. Again, if you use a saw without the guard on top, you do it at your own risk, and you have to be very, very careful. So yeah, so that's number 2. That's my wedge making jig. Right, so that's number 2. Let's move on to number 3. Now this, just like a simple wedge, but it actually serves 2 purposes. So let's talk about number 3 first. This is exactly 22 millimeters thick, this piece of timber, and that is the exact measurement that I leave underneath my doors. So if I'm hanging doors, this measurement has come through years of working with various carpet fitters. What you don't want to do is hang a door, not take enough off the bottom, and then have to come back once the carpets are fitting because it's rubbing on the carpets, and plane it. So we found 22 mil is the magic number. So what I basically do is when I put my door in, when I'm first fitting it, I run, once I've got the gaps at the top I'm happy with, once I've fitted the head, I then lay this on the floor and then mark a pencil on the top of this packer against the door. And then that gives me my 22 millimeters. The other one, number 4, now mainly this is for packing up my window boards, and I've done a video on that. So I put the window board onto the window, and then this is the wedge that I push in or out to get it square against the window before I fix it. So that's number 3 and number 4. Number 5, I've done a video on this, you may well have seen. This is for marking my door linings for my architrave setback and where my door stops go. This one is only for 35 millimeter internal doors, which is pretty much mostly what I fit. So if I got a 45 mil one, a fire door, then I just mark that old school with a tape measure. So yeah, I've done a video on that. You push it up against the lining, mark down this side for the architrave setback, and mark along the back here for the setback of the doorstop. So that's number 5. Number 6, now these are, I mean, this is the main one I use. This is what I set out my featherboarding with, you know, cladding. So I'll decide whatever gauge I'm going to have, and usually it's around about 150 millimeters if you're using a 175 board. And basically what this does, it just helps you, you lip it onto the board you've already done, and then the board you're about to fix, you just sit on the top of there, and it's just a really handy bit of kit that I use. I also use a mixture of this and checking my gauge. Maybe use this every 4 or 5 courses, and then I'll recheck my gauge from the bottom course, which will be my straight course, and maybe ping a line on it. Depends if it's far out or not. Usually it's pretty accurate with this. So as you can see here, some feather boarding. I think this was a 200 mil board, so it had a 175 mil exposed face with a 25 mil lap. So as you can see here, look, if the gauge was 150, you click this tool onto the course you already fitted, and then you just drop the next course down onto it. So really handy for you know, for fitting and gauging out this feather boarding. So again, very handy little bit of kit, and just made out of a scrap of ply. Number 7, again, done a video on this one. This is what I use for when I'm fitting bolt-through handles. So what I'm now going to do is push that through the hole in the latch, hold the square carefully on the end of the door because these have been pre-finished, and then just put a little mark in there. Don't go mad. And now I'll do the same from the other side. Just nice and gentle, don't need to go mad, because what you don't want to do is go too fast and blast out the other side. If you're offline, you might make a mess, because these holes are actually quite close to the edge of the fixing plate of the handle. You go through there like that. So I do that nice and tight. Let's have a look where we are. Lovely. I just find it really, really easy to get the spindle goes through here, then that goes through the latch, and then most of the bolt through handles I use, these little where the screws fix are 20 millimeters each side of the spindle. So I just find it's really makes it quick and easy. And again, I've done a video on that which you may or may not have seen. And I just put some rubber on the back side. It just helps it grip to the door a bit better. So yeah, very handy little bit of kit, just made out of some stair riser, I think, again. Then moving on to number 8 and 9. These ones, I'd been thinking about making these for a long time, and I was doing a job where I had some oak left over. These possibly took the longest to make, maybe took about 20 minutes to make these, whereas most of these ones, and you'll see, they all look pretty rough, because basically they are rough. They just, you search around for offcuts on the floor, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. So we knock them up on site and use them, and then they are used. If they're really useful, they get chucked in the bottom of the tool bag, and you can use them again. So these ones, basically, I made these, and I'll show you in a minute. These are additional supports for my saw bench, my fold-out saw bench. And what they help me do is when I'm cutting, maybe doing second fixing or something where I end up with shorter lengths of material, what this helps is to catch. It saves that smaller length of material dropping onto the floor. It also saves me having to buy another set of the proper end supports. So I'll just show you them on the stand now. So here's my, I know this is all DeWalt, this is my sort of chop saw setup. These fold out work stands are absolutely brilliant, and they fold down nicely and go in the van. So the saw goes in the middle, and then you set these end supports to the same height as the saw base here, and then when you're cutting material, it supports it either end. Now, as I said, the issue I have is that if I was doing a cut here, and even if I brought this one right up tight, you've still got maybe, I don't know, what is that, a couple of feet, maybe 600-700 millimeters from there to there. So if you're cutting a smaller piece of material, it will drop down in there. Now, you can just take this off and slide it further up here, or you could buy another set, but I don't think they're particularly cheap. So what I did, just to make it quick and easy, is I made a pair of these, and what these do, I moulded this little profile on the end of that there, and what that basically does is just slides in there like that. So what that does now is sort of halves the gap there, and I've also got this one for this side as well. So you can see that what I basically do now is it just gives me extra points of support. So I've got, you know, 1, 2, and then where the saw is 3, and then 4. I just find it really helpful. You know, I can slide this up and down. So again, if you're doing second fixing like skirting or anything, you'll know that, you know, one cut could be a big long cut. You know, you could be cutting a piece of skirting in half, so you've got a couple of meters over the end. And then the next cut could just be, you know, little boxing you were turning around or something, and you could just have a short bit. So I just find I can leave that set up, and I can just move this up and down, and it saved that irritating issue of cutting a short bit off and it dropping on the floor. And especially maybe if you were doing a corner boxing and you cut a nice scribe on one end of a skirting, and then you were just cutting the mitre for the other end, and then it falls on the floor and crushes the top of the scribe. So yeah, again, as I said, probably took me 20 minutes to make both of those, but they're absolutely brilliant, and I do use them a lot. So that's number 8 and number 9. Right, so I left number 1 because actually I kind of almost overlooked possibly the most important bits of kit that you make out of wood to help you as a carpenter, and that is my faithful trestles, my sawhorses. So let's just have a talk about those for a second, and how this bit that I've cut here interacts with those. So I think what I'll do to start with, I'll just put one of these sawhorses up on the bench so we can have a better look at it. These are wonderful, and you know you make these. It's one of those sort of things you do as an apprentice. It's one of the earlier things that your gaffer says, you know, have a go at making a set of sawhorses and see how you get on. And these are absolutely fantastic. I think these are 20 years old, and of all the bits and bobs that I make, all of the bits and bobs that you make as a carpenter, certainly from my point of view, these are the things that I would be the most lost if I didn't have. There's lots of other sawhorses that you can buy, you know, plastic ones and metal ones and fold-out ones, but I don't know, I just love these. They're so adaptable, and you know, they're good to stand on. You can work off them. I know they're a bit low and I'm quite tall, but you know, it helps with your core flexibility if you've got to, you know, bend down to cut stuff. So let's get this. I'll show you what I'm going to do with this bit. So I've got my stool here, and what this bit basically does, this angle that I've cut on here is the same as the angle of the leg here, and all I simply do, that's why it's got these two screws in, what I do is put it up against those legs there, and then I'm going to screw it on. Lovely. There. So now that is screwed on to the bottom of my stools. What I'm going to do is show you why I've done that. So that basically, I put that piece of timber on there because it helps me when I'm hanging doors. Now I haven't got any doors to show you at the minute for as an example, so I'm just going to use this bit of ply and wedge look. So let's have a look at that. So if you imagine that this is my door, you'll notice that I've got slots cut in the top of these sacrificial timbers that are on top of my stools. One's at 35mm and the other one's at 45mm, but one is for internal doors and one is for fire doors or external doors. Now again, this being 35mm, if this was a 35mm wide door, it would sit in there perfectly, but I wanted you to use this wedge. That's just for the video. So the reason I put this on the bottom here is it's twofold. Firstly, good practice, and I'm sure everybody does, it keeps the door off the floor. So, you know, you should always, when you're shooting indoors, you should always make sure that you've got something under it. You should always make sure you've got something under it to stop any damage to the edge of the door. But what this does, by screwing it to the legs of my stool, it makes the whole thing really stable, because the weight of the door is pushing down onto that piece of timber there, and it just means the whole thing is super sturdy. And I don't know if I can film it, but it's just a lot less likely to fall over. So it only takes a few minutes to cut that angle on, and I screw it on if I'm doing a run of doors. I've got some doors coming up, and then once I've finished doing it, I just unscrew it and tuck it in the back of the van. So there you go, that gives you a little bit of an insight into some of the things that I certainly make, and I'm sure other carpenters make, that help us throughout our day or whatever we're doing. And pretty much a lot of these little bits and bobs are made out of scraps. And I know in the joinery shop, joiners are no strangers to making, you know, sleds and jigs and things like that to help expand the use of a machine. On site, it's slightly different. As I said, all of these things, you know, they're all sort of pretty rough looking because they're pretty much just all made out of scraps that you find laying around, and don't really have the time to think, oh, I'm going to make a decent one of those and go and buy yourself some expensive ply. You just make them, they work, and you chuck them in the bottom of the bag until you need them again. I thought I would do a couple of honourable mentions along the same kind of lines. Not quite the same in terms of tools that actually help you do something. The first one is this. This is just my line that I'd be absolutely lost without. I've said it in my videos before, I love working to a line. You know, they never lie to you unless there's a bit of wind on and they can get a bit bendy. But absolutely love my line. So I've seen so many people store them on so many different things, from, you know, old bolts to bits of cardboard. But yeah, this is just a little bit of ply that becomes part of the tool, I suppose. So that's one honourable mention. And another one, and this is moving slightly further forward from making stuff sort of out of scraps, because this was more deliberately made, although it was still made out of an off-cut ply. Again, this gets a small honourable mention because, again, what we do as carpenters, I know as joiners, is make toolboxes and cases, but this is one that I did make. I had, this is for my, let's see if I can do it here. This has got my, is this a 680 little Makita 165mm saw. It was kind of just rattling around in the van, and I had also a little space in between where my toolboxes were, so I just knocked that up. It didn't take too long, but I just, with the table saw, it's really easy, just knocked that up and got a little space in there for the guide to go, and I've got some bits of foam and some felt tape, and it was one of those things. It was a little space I just wanted to populate a bit better, so that saw just pops in there, and then this little top I made just slides in. So yeah, that's just an honourable mention because that's quite cute, but I didn't really want to start going into the realms of, you know, toolboxes, because I think the video would be even longer. And maybe that's for another video. So I hope this video has not been too boring. It is a little bit maybe geeky or a little bit sort of carpenter orientated, but ultimately, you know, my channel is about carpentry. I hope you found it interesting, and I'd be really interested, as always, to hear from any of my fellow carpenters and joiners, to hear that if you've made anything like this, or if indeed you've made anything that I haven't made here that may be useful for me to make or anyone else who's watching. So as always, thanks very much for your support, and thanks for watching.